After a life-altering event, my world was turned upside down. I had always believed in black and white, but meeting him made me realize that love is neither simple nor predictable. I never expected to fall for a guy. Yet here I am, tangled in emotions I can't quite understand, all because of a single encounter. This is the story of how I found myself, and how he found a way to make me whole again. Chapter 1. The Unexpected Meeting. I had always thought I knew who I was. At least I had a decent idea. I had my routine. Wake up at 7 a.m., go to work, eat lunch at that crappy sandwich shop around the corner, and then come home to my empty apartment. Repeat, rinse. Maybe a weekend escape now and then. Life was simple, predictable, and I liked it that way. Or at least I thought I did. Then came him. It started on a rainy Tuesday, the kind of day where the world seems to slip into grayness, and you can't remember whether it's the weather or your own mood that's dragging you down. I was sitting at my usual spot in the cafe, scrolling through emails on my phone, the hum of half-empty conversations around me barely registering. The place was quiet enough for me to hide in my solitude. That's when he walked in. I didn't look up at first, wasn't interested in whatever drama he was bringing with him. But then I heard it. The sound of water dripping from a jacket onto the tile floor. The soft shuffle of wet shoes moving across the room. It was distracting. I glanced up, only for my gaze to land on him. He was tall, with messy dark hair that fell just short of his eyes, dressed in an oversized hoodie and jeans that hung a little too low. Not that I was paying attention to the way his clothes clung to him or anything, but yeah, that was the moment I realized I was staring. His eyes met mine briefly, just a flicker, then a quick shift away. Something about that instant made me feel a strange, inexplicable pull. I immediately looked back at my phone, hoping my face wasn't flushed. He went up to the counter, ordering something I couldn't quite hear over the low chatter. I felt oddly aware of him. The way his presence seemed to fill the space despite how nonchalant he was trying to act. My heart was suddenly beating faster. What was wrong with me? It's not like I'd never seen a guy before. Of course I had. So why did this one feel like he was magnetically drawing me in? I didn't want to admit it, but I was starting to get a little curious. When he took a seat, it was at the table across from mine. It was empty, and yet there was something magnetic about the proximity, like two stars caught in each other's orbit, just waiting to collide. I told myself it was nothing. I wasn't interested in guys like that. Hell, I wasn't interested in anyone at all. Not since Sarah. Don't even get me started on that mess. But the more I tried to ignore the pull in my chest, the more it lingered. I kept stealing glances at him when I thought he wasn't looking. There was something intriguing about the way he seemed so at ease, so effortlessly himself. He was reading something on his phone, but his brow was furrowed as though deep in thought. There was a kind of sadness about him, like he was carrying a weight that no one else could see. But maybe I was just projecting. Maybe that's why I couldn't look away. "Do you mind if I sit here?" His voice interrupted my thoughts, dragging me back to the present. I blinked, unsure if I had heard him right. "What?" He gestured to the empty chair across from me. "It's kind of crowded today. The other tables are full." I was about to say no. My personal space was important after all, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the way he was looking at me, almost like he was quietly asking permission, his eyes wide and vulnerable in a way I wasn't used to. "Sure," I muttered, feeling a flush creep up my neck. He smiled faintly, then dropped his bag on the seat and sat down. For a moment, neither of us said anything. The air between us was thick, like a moment suspended in time. "Thanks," he finally said, breaking the silence. No problem," I replied, my voice sounding a little too loud in my ears. My mind raced. I was not good at this, talking to strangers. But then again, he wasn't just a stranger. He was Someone I couldn't figure out. Not yet. Name's Luke, he said, his gaze flicking toward me. What's yours? I hesitated for a second. Ryan. Ryan. He repeated my name softly, almost like he was testing how it felt on his tongue. Nice to meet you. There was an odd kind of tension in the air now, one I couldn't place. I was suddenly hyper-aware of the space between us, the way the light seemed to reflect off his messy hair, the quiet hum of the cafe surrounding us. It should have been uncomfortable, but somehow it wasn't. It was intriguing. I'm new around here, Luke continued, his voice casual. Just moved into the apartment a few blocks away. Really? I asked, trying to sound more interested than I felt. What brings you here? Just needed a change of pace, I guess. His eyes met mine for a second, but then he looked away, focusing on his coffee. I didn't know why, but I found myself wanting to know more. Maybe it was the way he said things without saying anything at all. There was something about him that made me want to know his story, even though I knew I had no reason to care. Sounds like a good reason, I said, trying to keep the conversation going, even though my mind felt oddly foggy. For the next few minutes, we fell into an easy back and forth, both of us testing the waters of some silent, unspoken connection. His laugh, though quiet, had a warmth to it, something comforting about it. It made me feel less alone in a way I hadn't expected. But then the moment shifted. I felt my heart race again. Was this just a casual meeting? Or was there something more beneath the surface? I tried to shake the thought, telling myself that it didn't matter. It was just a conversation, a brief interaction, nothing more. But Luke's eyes kept meeting mine, like he was silently daring me to acknowledge whatever this was between us. And for some reason, I couldn't bring myself to look away. Chapter 2. The Uncomfortable Truth. The days after that coffee shop encounter were strange. Every time I thought about it, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, but I couldn't figure out if it was the way Luke smiled, or how his laugh made something in my chest tighten, or maybe it was just how easy it was to talk to him. I was trying to ignore it all, but that pull, that strange, magnetic pull, was undeniable. I told myself I wasn't the type of guy who was interested in guys, at least not in that way. I'd had my share of relationships before, brief, uncomplicated, and unremarkable. Sarah had been the last and the hardest to move on from. I hadn't even realized it at the time, but I'd let myself fall into the familiar routine of pushing away any feelings that made me uncomfortable. But with Luke, it was different, and it terrified me. It wasn't just that he was attractive, though yes, he was. There was something about the way he carried himself, the way his eyes lingered a little too long when we talked, that unsettled me. And those tiny moments of connection, they weren't just friendly, they were something else, something I didn't want to name yet. But of course, I tried to act normal when I saw him again. It was a week later at the same cafe on a Friday afternoon. Luke was there before me, sitting at the same table, his bag slung over the back of the chair like it had been the last time. My heart raced when I saw him. Why was it that something so simple made me feel like I couldn't breathe properly? "Hey," I said, sliding into the seat across from him. I tried to sound casual, but my voice came out too sharp, too eager. He looked up from his phone and grinned, that same soft, easy grin that sent a weird shiver down my spine. "Hey, Ryan, how's your week been?" I shrugged, forcing myself to relax. "Same old. Work's been boring as usual." "You?" "Same. Just trying to get settled in." Luke reached for his coffee, then paused. His eyes met mine, and for a moment, there was a silent understanding between us. Something unsaid, yet so loud in my head that it almost made my ears ring. "You look tired," he said after a beat, his tone soft but direct. I stiffened. "I'm fine. Just Didn't sleep well, that's all. I forced a smile, but I knew it didn't reach my eyes. Maybe I was lying, but I didn't want him to see it. He didn't seem convinced. Luke stared at me for a moment, his brow furrowing. Then he looked away as if he knew it was none of his business. But there was something in the way he'd said it, in the way his eyes searched my face, that made me feel seen in a way I didn't want to be. I wasn't used to people seeing me, really seeing me. It was uncomfortable, but I didn't pull away. Not this time. Are you sure? He asked, his voice gentle. I nodded, trying to brush it off. Yeah, just tired. We lapsed into a silence, but it wasn't the awkward kind. It was the kind where everything that needed to be said already hung in the air. The things I didn't want to face, the things I didn't want to acknowledge were swirling around us. But neither of us said them out loud. I broke the silence first, nervously taking a sip of my coffee. So, you're still adjusting to the new place? Luke nodded slowly, tapping his fingers on his cup. Yeah, it's strange. I don't really know anyone around here. It's hard to get used to being alone. The words hung there for a moment, heavy and raw. I wanted to respond, to say something reassuring, but for some reason, I couldn't bring myself to. Something about that admission felt like an invitation, like he was opening a door to something neither of us was ready to walk through. I get that, I said instead, because it was the only thing I could think of. I've been there before, moving to a new place. It's hard. Feels like you're just floating, you know? Luke's gaze softened. Yeah, exactly. It's like you're stuck between two worlds, the one you left behind and the one you're trying to build. I couldn't help but feel a connection to that. For some reason, his words felt too familiar, like they mirrored something inside me, something I hadn't been able to articulate yet, but maybe I could now. Maybe if I let him in a little more. Do you think you'll stay here? I asked before I could stop myself, my curiosity getting the better of me. He shrugged, but there was something different in the way he did it this time. It wasn't casual. It was thoughtful. I don't know yet. I guess I'll just see where it takes me. Where it takes you, I repeated softly, feeling the weight of the words. Maybe that was what I was afraid of, letting myself be taken somewhere I wasn't ready to go. Before I could think too much about it, Luke set his cup down and leaned forward slightly. Hey, can I ask you something? Sure, I said, my pulse quickening. There was something about the way he said it that made me feel like this wasn't just casual small talk. Like it mattered. Why are you so guarded? He asked, his voice sincere. I've noticed it. Every time we talk, you don't let people in. I froze. My heart pounded in my chest, and I found myself suddenly unable to breathe. He was right, of course. I didn't let anyone in. Not fully. Not since Sarah. Not since I realized how much it hurt to care. I don't know what you mean, I muttered, looking away, suddenly unsure of how to respond. But Luke wasn't letting me off the hook that easily. You do, Ryan. You know exactly what I mean. His eyes softened, but there was an edge of something more there. Something persistent, like he wasn't going to let me hide from myself anymore. The weight of his words settled in. I couldn't run from this. Not now. Not when the truth was starting to surface. The truth I hadn't wanted to face for so long. Maybe I wasn't just afraid of being alone. Maybe I was afraid of what would happen if I let someone in. If I let him in. Chapter 3, Moments of Clarity. The next time I saw Luke, I almost didn't go to the cafe. It wasn't that I didn't want to see him. I couldn't stop thinking about him, honestly. But that's exactly the problem. I didn't want to think about him. It was easier to keep things casual, to pretend this was all just a friendly interaction. He was just a guy I met. So why did my stomach twist every time I thought about him? Why did the sound of his voice linger in my mind like a song I couldn't get out of my head? But when I walked in, I saw him sitting at the same table, his eyes scanning a book, the morning light filtering through the windows and casting a soft glow on his face. He looked different, more relaxed, more at ease, like he had found a space that was his own, even in a city that felt so unfamiliar. I hesitated for a moment, standing just inside the door, watching him. There was an odd comfort in knowing he was here, but it also made me feel like an intruder in his world. My pulse quickened when he looked up and caught my eye. He smiled, an effortless, warm smile that made everything in me want to run toward him. But I stayed where I was, frozen in place, unsure of what was happening to me. "Ryan," he called, his voice carrying over the low hum of the cafe. He raised his hand in a casual wave, his face lighting up at the sight of me. For a moment, I stood there, caught between the desire to go to him and the instinct to retreat. I didn't understand why I was being like this. What was so special about Luke that made my heart race and my thoughts scatter? I forced myself to walk over, sitting down across from him with a sheepish smile. "Hey," I said, my voice a little too tight. "Sorry, I was just thinking." "About what?" Luke asked, arching an eyebrow as he closed the book in front of him. His gaze was steady, his expression casual, but I couldn't ignore the way his eyes seemed to search mine, like he was looking for something. "Nothing," I muttered, rubbing the back of my neck. "Just work stuff. You know how it is." Luke didn't buy it, but he didn't push. Instead, he just leaned back in his chair, his lips curving into a knowing smile. "It's funny. I can never figure you out, Ryan. You're so careful, so guarded." I let out a nervous laugh, but it sounded hollow to my own ears. "I'm not that bad." Luke raised an eyebrow. "You are. You don't let anyone close." His words stung, but it wasn't the kind of sting that made me angry. It was the kind of sting that made me uncomfortable. Because he was right. I had built walls, thick ones, to keep people out. And it wasn't just because of Sarah. It was because of me. I didn't trust myself. Not enough to let anyone in. "I don't know what you mean," I said quickly, my words defensive. I grabbed my coffee, trying to hide behind the cup. "I'm just private." Luke's eyes softened as he leaned forward slightly. "You don't have to be private with me, Ryan. I'm not going to judge you." I froze. The words hit me harder than I expected. Like a door I didn't even realize was closed had suddenly been flung open. The vulnerability in his voice, the way he was giving me space to be myself, made my heart skip a beat. "I'm not," I started, but then I stopped. I didn't know how to finish that sentence. How could I explain that the reason I was so guarded wasn't because I didn't trust him, but because I didn't trust myself? Luke sat back, his gaze unwavering. "You don't have to explain anything, Ryan. But I'm here, you know? If you ever want to talk about it." There was something about the simplicity of his offer that shook me. He didn't push. He didn't try to force anything. He just was there. And I had no idea how to respond to that. I wasn't used to this kind of kindness, this kind of sincerity. It was disorienting, almost overwhelming. I looked down at my coffee, suddenly unable to meet his gaze. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks. What was it about Luke that made everything feel so raw, so real? "I don't know if I can do that," I said quietly, almost to myself. "I'm not good at this. Not anymore." Luke's voice softened, but there was a strength behind it. "Maybe that's okay. You don't have to have everything figured out right now. But if you ever want to try, I'm here." I nodded slowly, though I wasn't sure I understood what he meant. And that was the problem. I didn't understand any of this. Not the way my heart raced whenever I saw him, or the way my thoughts circled around him even when he wasn't around. I didn't understand why the idea of letting him in felt like both the most terrifying and the most relieving thing in the world. He didn't press me further, but I could tell he was waiting for something, as though he was giving me space to process, to figure out what this all meant. I should probably get going, I said finally, standing up. I have some stuff to do. Luke smiled, though it wasn't the usual carefree grin. There was something softer in it now, like he understood more than I was letting on. Take care, Ryan. I'll see you soon. I nodded, my throat tight, and made my way out of the cafe, my mind swirling with thoughts I wasn't sure I was ready to confront. But something had shifted between us, something I couldn't ignore anymore. It wasn't just friendly. It wasn't just casual. Whatever this was, it was more, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to face it. Chapter 4. The cracks begin to show. The strange, the way things sneak up on you when you least expect it. One moment, everything is just fine, routine, safe, and the next, your whole world is turned upside down by the weight of something you didn't even know you were holding on to. I couldn't stop thinking about Luke. It had been days since that conversation in the cafe, but his words kept echoing in my mind. You don't have to be private with me, Ryan. As much as I wanted to shake it off, as much as I wanted to tell myself it was just a casual comment, the truth was that it made me feel something I wasn't ready to deal with. I spent the entire week avoiding him. It wasn't intentional at first. I told myself I was busy, work, errands, the usual distractions. But the truth was, I was terrified. Terrified that I might let something slip, something about myself that I wasn't ready to face. Every time I thought about seeing Luke again, I felt a cold knot in my stomach. He had gotten under my skin in a way I hadn't expected, and the thought of letting him in felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. But then, on Friday, I found myself walking into the cafe. It was like I didn't even have a choice. It had been a long week, and the urge to see him was more than I could ignore. As I stepped inside, I was met with the familiar warmth of the cafe, the hum of voices, the soft clink of cups and saucers. But there, at the same table, sat Luke. He looked up as I walked in, and his face lit up with a smile that sent a jolt through my chest. I paused for a moment, my heart racing in my chest. He hadn't said anything, hadn't called me or messaged me, but I felt like he'd been waiting for me. You came, he said, his voice a little surprised but mostly pleased. There was an underlying hope in his tone that caught me off guard. Yeah, I muttered, rubbing the back of my neck. Guess I didn't have much of a choice. Luke smiled, and I felt that pull again, that strange gravity that made it impossible to ignore him. I'm glad you're here. He gestured to the seat across from him. I saved you a spot. I hesitated, then sat down, my mind racing. I was trying not to let the nerves show, trying not to let him see that every part of me was screaming to run. But something about being this close to him felt right, more than I wanted to admit. So, I said, trying to sound casual, how's your week been? It's been okay, Luke replied, though there was an unreadable look in his eyes, like he knew something I wasn't saying. I've been thinking about what you said last time, about being careful. You really don't let people in, do you? I froze, the words cutting through the thin veil of pretense I'd been hiding behind. Of course he remembered. How could he not? I started, but I wasn't sure how to finish. The truth was, I didn't know how to explain it. I didn't know how to explain the walls I'd built, the reason I kept everyone at arm's length. It was easier that way, safer. Luke's gaze softened, as though he could sense my hesitation. He didn't push me, but I could tell he was waiting for me to say something, anything. You know, Ryan, it's okay to not have everything figured out. You don't have to be perfect. I snorted, though it was hollow. I'm not trying to be perfect. I don't do well with feelings. He didn't laugh. He just watched me as though waiting for me to go on. I had someone once, I said before I could stop myself. The words slipped out, raw and unfiltered. And it wasn't perfect. It wasn't even close. But it was real and I thought it could work. But it didn't. And now I can't. I don't know if I can let anyone else in. Not again. I felt a lump form in my throat, but I didn't want to look away. Didn't want to show weakness. But I couldn't help myself. The words kept spilling out. I was stupid. I let myself believe in something, and it crashed down on me. And now it feels like I'm just going through the motions, trying not to get hurt again. Trying to keep everything at arm's length. Luke didn't say anything at first. He just sat there, watching me with that steady, open gaze like he wasn't going to judge me for the mess I was spilling out in front of him. Like he saw me, all of me, and wasn't backing away. I get it, he said softly. I get that fear. I've been there. I looked up at him, surprised. Luke, I hadn't expected him to understand. You have. He nodded slowly, his eyes distant for a moment, as if lost in a memory. Yeah, it's hard to open up when you've been hurt, but if you keep pushing people away, you're shutting yourself off from the chance of something real. His words hit me harder than I expected. I had been so focused on my own fear, on keeping things under control, that I hadn't even considered that maybe I was shutting myself off from something I actually needed. Something that could be different. I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. For the first time, I felt a crack in the wall I'd spent so long building around myself. Luke had given me something I wasn't sure I could handle. Something fragile. Something I wasn't sure I was ready for. You don't have to do anything you're not ready for, Luke said gently, as though reading my thoughts. But just think about it. You deserve to have something real, Ryan. You deserve more than just playing it safe. I didn't know how to answer him. How could I, when every word he spoke felt like it was undoing something inside of me? But I wasn't sure I was ready to let go of the fear either. I don't know if I can, I muttered, the words barely escaping my lips. I don't know if I can trust anyone again. Luke leaned forward, his eyes locking onto mine. I'm not asking you to trust me, Ryan. I'm just asking you to be real with me, to stop running. For a long moment, we just sat there, the space between us charged with something I couldn't name. My heart was pounding in my chest, and every instinct told me to pull back, to close off again. But a small part of me, the part that had been buried for so long, wanted to lean in. And for the first time in a long while, I wasn't sure if running was the right answer anymore. Chapter 5. Facing the Unspoken. The days after that conversation with Luke were confusing, to say the least. I kept replaying his words over and over in my head. You deserve more than just playing it safe. It wasn't a harsh statement, but it was enough to make me stop and think about everything I'd been avoiding for so long. The truth was, I was terrified. Terrified that opening myself up again would be the biggest mistake of my life. But it wasn't just that. I was scared that whatever I was feeling for Luke was more than just a passing attraction. It was more than just the small things, like the way his laugh made my heart race or the way his smile lingered in my mind long after I left him. It was deeper than that. I hadn't felt anything like this in a long time, and it terrified me because it felt too real, too raw. With Sarah, everything had been safe, predictable. But this, with Luke, it was like walking into the unknown, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for that kind of leap. I hadn't seen him since that day in the cafe. Part of me wanted to text him, to reach out, but another part of me was still frozen, unsure of what to say. Was I supposed to act like nothing had changed? Like I hadn't just spilled my entire emotional mess in front of him? Was I supposed to pretend I hadn't been thinking about him every second since? But when I woke up that morning and saw a message from Luke, my heart skipped. Hey Ryan, I was thinking about you. Are you free this afternoon? Maybe we can grab a coffee? I stared at the text for what felt like an eternity. I could feel the weight of it. It wasn't casual. It wasn't just an invitation, it felt like an opening. A chance to finally address the tension that had been hanging between us, whether I was ready or not. I sat there for a long time, debating whether or not to respond. Part of me wanted to push him away, to keep him at arm's length. But another part, one I couldn't ignore, wanted to say yes, to let him in, to see where this could go. I sighed and typed back, "Yeah, I'm free. Let's meet." It was the first step. The first step toward something I wasn't sure I was ready for. When I arrived at the cafe, I was a mess. My mind was racing. What was I supposed to say to him? How was I supposed to act? The last time we had talked, I had let my guard down. I had shown him parts of myself I hadn't shared with anyone in a long time. But now everything felt different. It felt like we were on the edge of something bigger than either of us was ready to admit. And when I saw Luke sitting at our usual table, that same calm, knowing expression on his face, I realized that no matter how much I wanted to turn away, I couldn't. He had become a part of my life, whether I was ready for it or not. "Hey," I said, sitting down across from him. I smiled, but it felt a little forced. "Sorry I'm late." Luke smiled back, that soft, reassuring smile that had become so familiar to me. "You're fine. I was just waiting for you." He paused, his eyes studying me for a moment. "How have you been?" I shrugged, trying to act nonchalant. "You know, same old. Work. Life." But the truth was, I hadn't been okay. Not really. Every day felt like a struggle between wanting to get closer to Luke and the fear that came with it. The fear of losing control. "I've been thinking about what you said," I added, my voice quieter this time. "About not running. About being real." Luke's gaze softened, his eyes locking onto mine. "And? What do you think?" I swallowed hard. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to explain that I was terrified of being vulnerable, of opening myself up to something I couldn't control. But I also didn't want to lie to him. I didn't want to keep pretending everything was fine when I knew it wasn't. I started, my voice shaking slightly. "I think I'm scared." Luke didn't look surprised. In fact, he looked relieved. "Scared of what?" "Scared of being hurt?" I admitted, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "Scared of letting someone in, because the last time I did, it destroyed me, and I don't know if I can go through that again." The silence between us stretched, heavy with the weight of my confession. For a moment, Luke didn't say anything, and I wondered if I had said too much. But then, his hand reached across the table, gently resting on mine. His touch was warm, comforting in a way I hadn't expected. "I'm not asking you to jump in, Ryan," Luke said softly, his voice low and reassuring. "I'm not asking you to trust me all at once. I just want you to know that I'm here. And if you're willing, I'm willing to be patient. We don't have to rush anything." I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, the anxiety mixing with something else. Something like hope, or maybe even longing. It was such a simple thing for him to say, but it hit me harder than I expected. His patience, his understanding. It felt like a lifeline, like a chance to breathe when I thought I might drown in my own fear. "I don't know if I can promise you anything," I whispered, looking down at our hands. "But I'll try. I'll try to let you in, Luke, even if it scares the hell out of me." Luke squeezed my hand, his smile gentle and knowing. "That's all I need, Ryan. Just try." And in that moment, I realized that for the first time in a long time, I wasn't alone. Maybe I wasn't ready to fully open up yet, but I didn't have to be. I didn't have to have everything figured out right now. All I needed to do was take that first step and trust that Luke would be there, waiting for me when I was ready. Chapter 6. The space between us. The days after our conversation in the cafe felt strange. I thought that maybe, just maybe, things would feel easier. like I'd finally made a decision to face my fear and move forward. But instead, everything seemed to be hanging in this delicate balance, this space between us that neither of us dared to cross. Luke had been giving me time. He didn't push me. He didn't try to rush anything. But I could feel it, the way his gaze lingered a little longer than it used to, the way his smile seemed to carry a weight of something unspoken between us. And every time we met, I felt the tension grow, slowly, insidiously, until it became almost unbearable. I had told myself that I'd try, that I'd take it slow. But every time I saw Luke, every time we shared one of those quiet moments, I felt that pull. I felt myself wanting more. But how could I let myself want it? Want him? When all I'd ever known was disappointment and hurt. When all I had ever known was how to build walls to protect myself. It was late on a Thursday when Luke called. I was sitting at my kitchen counter, lost in my thoughts, when the phone buzzed. His name appeared on the screen, and for a moment, I hesitated. Part of me wanted to ignore it, wanted to keep myself safe. But another part of me, the part one had been fighting against for weeks, wanted to hear his voice. I picked up. "Hey," Luke said, his voice warm and easy, as though he hadn't noticed the slight hesitation before I answered. "You free tonight?" I was already nervous just hearing his voice. I was just about to grab dinner. "What's up?" "I was thinking," Luke continued, "maybe we could do something different tonight. Something spontaneous." I raised an eyebrow. "Spontaneous?" "Yeah, I know you're not exactly the spontaneous type," he teased, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "But I was thinking we could take a walk. Maybe grab a drink somewhere?" I hesitated. Normally, I'd shy away from things like that. The idea of being so exposed, so present with someone else, felt almost impossible. But this wasn't just anyone. This was Luke. "Okay," I said, before I could second-guess myself. "Yeah, I think I'd like that." When I arrived at the park later that evening, I found Luke sitting on a bench near the fountain. The lights from the surrounding trees cast a soft glow on his face, making him look almost ethereal, like he belonged in this quiet, peaceful moment. My heart skipped a beat as I approached, unsure of how to navigate the space between us. He stood up when he saw me, his face lighting up with that same warm smile I'd come to crave. "Hey," he said, his voice low but warm. "I'm glad you came." I nodded, suddenly feeling self-conscious. "I'm glad too. This place is nice." "It's one of my favorites," Luke replied, and I could hear the sincerity in his tone. "I thought it might be nice to get away from all the noise. Just be here for a little while." We started walking along the path, the night air cool but refreshing. There was a quiet between us, not uncomfortable, but full of the unspoken words that had been building for weeks. I could feel the weight of it pressing down on me, threatening to spill out. "I've been thinking about what you said," I said after a few moments. My voice was tentative, like I wasn't sure if I was ready to say the words, but they were already forming in my mind. About being real, about not running. Luke glanced at me, his expression open. And I don't know how to do it," I admitted, the words coming out more easily than I expected. "I don't know how to stop being afraid. Every time I think I might actually let myself care, I freeze up. I get scared." Luke didn't answer right away. He just kept walking beside me, his presence steady and unshaken. After a long pause, he finally spoke. "Fear's not a bad thing, Ryan," he said quietly. "It's just part of the process. But you don't have to let it control you. You don't have to let it decide what you can and can't do." I stopped walking, my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't tell if it was the quiet confidence in his voice or the weight of his words, but something about it made me feel both comforted and exposed at the same time. Felt like he was asking me to let go of something, but I wasn't sure I could. I don't know if I can trust myself, I confessed, my voice barely above a whisper. I've spent so long convincing myself that being alone is easier, safer. Luke stopped too, turning to face me. But you're not alone. You don't have to be. I felt the truth in his words, but I was still too afraid to believe them fully. How could I let go of this fear when it had kept me safe for so long? When it was the only thing that had kept me from getting hurt again, we stood there, just looking at each other, the quiet hum of the city in the distance. There was a softness to Luke now, an understanding that I hadn't seen before. I could feel the pull between us again, stronger than ever. But this time it wasn't just curiosity or attraction. It was something deeper, something I wasn't sure I was ready to face. "Ryan," Luke said softly, stepping closer. "I'm not going anywhere. You don't have to do this alone." I didn't know how to respond. All I could do was stand there, caught between the desire to reach out and the fear that it would all fall apart if I did. Finally, I took a step forward, closing the gap between us, my heart pounding in my chest. For a moment we just stood there, inches apart. The tension was so thick it felt like it could break. But it didn't. Instead, Luke reached up and gently cupped my face in his hands, his touch warm, grounding. His gaze was soft, searching, and I could see the quiet intensity in his eyes. "Don't be scared, Ryan," he whispered. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to respond to something so real, so raw. But in that moment, I realized that maybe, just maybe, the fear wasn't something I had to run from. Maybe it was something I could face. Chapter 7, The Breaking Point. I don't know when it happened. I don't know when I stopped fighting it. But one thing was certain. I couldn't keep pretending anymore. I couldn't keep walking this thin line, too afraid to fall to one side or the other. The space between us, the one I'd spent so long trying to navigate, had narrowed so much so that it felt like there was no longer any distance at all. Every glance, every touch, every smile from Luke seemed to pull me closer, even as I tried to hold myself back. I had spent weeks convincing myself that I wasn't ready for this, that I couldn't handle it. But the truth was, I wanted it. I wanted him, and it terrified me. That night, we met at the same park again. It had become our place, the spot where we'd slowly let down our guard, where I had let him see parts of me that I hadn't shared with anyone in years. And tonight, as I walked toward the fountain, I couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to change. Luke was already there, leaning against the stone edge, his hands in his pockets. The way the moonlight caught the outline of his face made everything feel surreal, like we were caught in a moment outside of time. His gaze lifted as I approached, and I could see the hint of something in his eyes, something soft, something unspoken. "Hey," I said, my voice a little shaky, even though I tried to sound calm. He smiled at me, the kind of smile that made me feel like the world had shifted on its axis. "Hey, you good?" I nodded, though I wasn't sure I was. I was never really good when I was around him, not in the way I wanted to be. It was like he had a way of breaking down all the walls I'd so carefully constructed around myself. And I didn't know if I was ready for that. "You've been quiet lately," Luke said, his voice low. "Are you okay?" I knew he was asking more than just about my day. He was asking about everything. About me. I hesitated, feeling the weight of his gaze on me. I wasn't sure how to answer, not without revealing everything I'd been bottling up. But tonight I couldn't hold it in any longer. "I'm scared, Luke," I admitted, the words slipping out almost in a whisper. "I'm scared of what this could be, of what this could mean." He didn't respond right away. Instead, he took a step closer to me, closing the gap between us. I could feel the heat from his body, his presence making everything feel more intense, more real. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breath, but nothing felt steady anymore. Scared of what? He asked, his voice softer now, almost a murmur. I swallowed again, searching for the words to explain what I felt. Scared that if I let myself want this, if I let myself want you, it'll fall apart. That I'll lose control and get hurt again. Luke's gaze softened, and for a moment, he just stood there, as if giving me space to process. But then his hand reached out, brushing gently against mine. The touch was so simple, yet it sent a shock through my system. You don't have to be scared, he said. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to hurt you. But I wasn't sure I believed him. I wasn't sure I believed anyone anymore. After everything I'd been through, after everything I'd lost, it was hard to believe that anything real could come from this. I wanted it, God. I wanted it so badly, but fear still clung to me like a shadow I couldn't shake. I don't know how to let go, I confessed, my voice thick with emotion. I don't know how to just trust. Luke stepped closer, his body almost touching mine now. His hand lingered at my side, not quite touching, but close enough that I could feel the heat of his skin. He looked into my eyes, his gaze steady, unwavering. You don't have to trust me all at once, Ryan, he said softly. Just take one step at a time. You don't have to have all the answers right now. Just let me in a little. Let me show you that you don't have to be afraid. I could feel the tears welling up, though I tried to hold them back. It was like a dam had broken inside me. All the fear, all the doubt, all the walls I had built to protect myself from getting hurt, they were crumbling. I didn't know if I was ready for this, but I also didn't know how much longer I could keep holding myself back. Luke's hand finally touched mine, his fingers sliding between mine, holding me gently but firmly. My breath caught in my throat, and for the first time I didn't pull away. I didn't retreat. I let him in, and in that moment, something inside me shifted. The fear didn't disappear, but it wasn't as loud as it used to be. It was still there, lingering at the edges of my mind, but for the first time, I felt like I didn't have to listen to it. I looked up at Luke, my chest tight with emotion, and without thinking, I reached out and kissed him. It was soft at first.
Tentative.
But the moment our lips touched, something inside me snapped. All the hesitation, all the fear, it disappeared, replaced by something that felt like relief, like finally coming home. Luke kissed me back, his hands sliding to the back of my neck, pulling me closer. His lips were warm and sure, and for the first time in a long time, I let myself feel it, everything, without second-guessing it. When we finally pulled away, breathless and wide-eyed, I could feel the space between us had vanished completely. We weren't just standing on opposite sides of a distance anymore. We were together, and I knew deep down that this was just the beginning. Ryan, Luke whispered, his voice thick with emotion. You don't have to be scared anymore. I shook my head, a half-smile tugging at my lips despite the storm raging inside me. I don't think I'll ever not be scared, I said softly. But I'm starting to believe that maybe it's worth it. Luke smiled then, his hands still resting on my shoulders, as if he couldn't quite bring himself to let go. Yeah, maybe it is. Chapter 8. The Aftermath. The kiss lingered on my lips long after we pulled apart. I could feel it, feel the shift, the change that had settled between us. It wasn't just physical, though the intensity of it had been overwhelming. No, this felt deeper, like the walls I had spent so long building around myself had finally cracked wide open. And for once, instead of retreating, I stood there, fully exposed, letting the world, letting Luke see me for who I was. But even as the weight of that realization settled in, another feeling crept in. Something I wasn't quite sure how to deal with. Now what? Luke didn't let go of me immediately. He kept his hands on my shoulders, his touch reassuring, like he was grounding me in the moment, making sure I didn't slip away. But the quiet that followed felt heavier than any of the words we'd shared up until that point. There were so many things left unsaid, so many feelings tangled between us that I wasn't sure how to untangle. I looked at Luke, his expression unreadable for a moment, before it softened into something gentle, almost vulnerable. "You okay?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, though my heart was pounding in my chest, and my mind was racing with all the things I didn't know how to say. "I'm not sure," I admitted, my voice shaky. "I'm not sure what this means." "What we mean?" Luke's hand slid down to mine, and he squeezed it lightly, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. "We'll figure it out. One step at a time, remember?" I couldn't help but smile a little, even though I was still trying to process everything. "Yeah," I said softly. "One step at a time." We didn't say much more that night. We walked around the park, just the two of us, as if there were nothing else in the world.
No expectations.
No past. Just the raw, unspoken connection that had brought us together in the first place. By the time we reached the edge of the park, the moon had sunk lower in the sky, and the city lights glimmered in the distance, casting a soft glow over everything. It felt like we had our own little world for a while, a bubble where nothing could hurt us. But of course, reality had a way of sneaking back in. "I have to go soon," Luke said, breaking the silence. His voice was quiet, almost reluctant, like he didn't want to leave, either. I looked at him, trying to ignore the pang of disappointment that shot through me. Yeah, I should probably head back too, but we didn't let go of each other. We stood there for a few moments longer, our fingers still entwined, as if neither of us wanted to be the first to let go. Finally, Luke took a step back, his hand sliding from mine, and I felt the loss immediately. It wasn't just physical. It was like something had been ripped away, something I didn't know I needed until it was gone. "So," Luke said, running a hand through his hair, his smile returning, "I'll text you tomorrow?" I nodded, trying to ignore the ache in my chest. "Yeah, I'd like that." "Good," he said, his tone a little lighter now. "I'll see you soon, Ryan." I smiled at him, though it didn't quite reach my eyes. "Yeah, soon." I watched as he turned and started walking toward the street. He didn't look back, but I could feel his presence even after he was gone. It was like the air around me had shifted, and I was left with the quiet realization that something had changed between us, something that couldn't be undone. The walk home felt longer than usual, like my mind was racing 100 miles a minute, trying to make sense of everything. I wasn't sure how to navigate what was happening, but I knew one thing. I wasn't ready to walk away from it. Not yet. Not now. When I got home, I sat down on the couch, still trying to catch my breath. The events of the night had left me spinning, and I couldn't seem to stop thinking about Luke, about how he had kissed me, about how he had been there for me, not rushing me, but gently pulling me into something real. But now, as I sat there alone, I felt the weight of everything else. The fear was still there, lurking at the edges of my mind, ready to remind me of all the ways things could go wrong. I had always been good at convincing myself that I was better off alone, that I didn't need anyone. But now I wasn't so sure anymore. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, snapping me out of my thoughts. I picked it up, my heart skipping when I saw Luke's name on the screen. "Hey, I just wanted to say, that kiss. I don't know what it means yet, but I think it means something. I'll talk to you soon." I stared at the message for a long time. My fingers hovered over the screen, and I knew that responding to him wouldn't be easy. I wasn't sure what to say. I wasn't sure what I felt. But I realized something in that moment. I didn't have to have everything figured out. I didn't have to have all the answers. I just had to be honest with myself, with Luke, and take it one step at a time. Like he said, I finally typed back, "Yeah, I think it means something too." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. And as the phone buzzed again with his reply, I felt a tiny flicker of hope spark inside me. "Good night, Ryan. Talk to you soon." I put the phone down, leaning back into the couch. The fear was still there, but it felt different now. Felt like something I could handle. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel so alone in the world. Maybe it wasn't all figured out. Maybe we were still figuring it out. But the connection between us was real, and I wasn't ready to let it go. Not yet.